All right, with snow in the forecast for next week, we're having a rather mild fall so far. Could that be a sign of things to come? Let's take a look at the winter forecast.
How would you characterize the last several winters? Typical, mild, extreme? What is typical for this area? If last winter was your cup of tea, will you be looking forward to another one like it? We will get to that in a moment. For now, let's take a look at some information that spells out the likelihood of another mild winter happening again by looking at what the last few years have been like. We just experienced 3 amazing winters in a row. The 3rd snowiest, the 5th snowiest, and the least snowiest. We set the all-time record last winter for the lowest seasonal snowfall with only 3.9 inches of snow. The previous 2 winters had 80 inches between them. Which way will we go this winter? In the 41 Action News Weather Department, we use the LRC, Lezak's recurring cycle, which indicates a unique weather pattern sets up right around this time of the year. It is complicated, but it gives us great insight into what important features developing in the weather pattern will end up producing winter storm systems or dry weather patterns. It is still evolving now.
I hold in my hand the weather maps for this new weather pattern that is setting up. And we've been analyzing these for the last several weeks using the LRC. And if you can unlock the secrets to the LRC, I feel it is the best forecasting tool in the field of meteorology today.
The pieces of the LRC puzzle are still coming together, but there is more. Some weather wildcards must be calculated into our winter forecast formula to decide when it will be wet, dry, snowy, cold, and mild. One wildcard is the Arctic Oscillation, or the AO. The AO went deep negative during the 2 snowy winters, and it went high positive during the almost snowless winter last year. When the AO is positive, Arctic air is more likely to be held north across Canada, which is what happened last winter. When it is negative, the Arctic air is more likely to plunge south into the United States like it did the previous 2 winters. Another wild card is El Nino, or La Nina. Meteorologist George Waldenberger explains.
We take you to the equator, where the Pacific waters fluctuate between the warmer El Nino and the not as warm La Nina. These temperatures impact the main jet stream, which in turn impacts our weather. Currently, we're in a neutral phase, and we've seen this going into winter about 18 times since 1900. Over the course of the following winters, our snowfall for those years has averaged 18.3 inches.
Superstorm Sandy. Hurricane Sandy got swallowed up into a part of the weather pattern that will likely return often this season, as it was followed up a week later by another storm. This is one of the main features in this year's LRC.
Evolving before your eyes is a unique weather pattern that we are about to experience for the next year. We have our winter forecast formula, which combines the LRC with what we learn about the Arctic Oscillation, El Nino, La Nina, other factors. Our knowledge of all this allows us to make accurate weather forecasts. This year, in this year's pattern using the LRC, one hot spot is over the northeastern part of the country, Hurricane Sandy. Another hot spot that has happened a few times from the upper Midwest to the Great Lakes down into the Ohio River Valley, and there's a third one out west. The predominant pattern, however, is this one in the northeast, 50% of the time, 30% of the time, the upper Midwest. Notice how Kansas City is not in the path of these winter storms. However, the Arctic Oscillation is likely going to go negative a few times this winter, and it's going to force everything farther south, and that's when we will have our winter weather.
There are likely other hidden factors and variables.
I believe in the LRC, but I also have my own theory. Some would call it a little nutty. I believe that if there are lots of acorns falling from the oak trees, then it means we could have a cold winter. Last year there weren't that many acorns, but this year I found more acorns.
Brett's acorn theory may have some merit this year. Last winter was so mild that we are convinced this year will have a harsher winter. There may be one ice storm, but likely not a major one. Longer, mild spells will be counteracted by 2 or 3 Arctic outbreaks. So we are forecasting near average temperatures. Expect somewhere between 10 and 20 inches of snow across our viewing area. The KC metro area will likely have a 5-inch snowstorm, a 3-inch snowstorm, and 3 or 4 smaller snow events. This will add up to around 14 inches of snow.
And we're still identifying some features, how long the cycle is, and today Jeff and I found something really, really interesting that's going to help us make accurate forecasts. So we'll update this in a few weeks, but right now we have high confidence it'll be much more snow than last winter, but that's easy.
Well, yeah, because we really almost had none. So when do you think this is really going to start setting up and snowing, I guess?
Well, next week, the Arctic oscillation is supposed to go negative. That brings an increased chance of cold air coming down, and there's a little storm. So next week will be an example of what could happen. So let's see what happens.
So we might snow next week.
That's right.
And no big blizzards, it looks like. Those paralyzing blizzards are what we don't want to see.
Ones we had a couple
Maybe not here, but the East Coast, the Great Lakes, and out west, they're going to have a bad winter.
So we're just not in one of those big red areas that you have up there.
Exactly. So to recap real quick, and you go online and check this out, we have above average temperatures, near to above average temperatures, 1 week to moderate ice storm, and we are learning a lot more. 14 inches of snow. Go to the weather blog. I just posted it at weatherblog.kshb.com. I spent about 5 hours on that this weekend, so check that out.
You betcha. We will. Thanks.